guys, welcome to Brian's Man Cave. So we're going to continue on with the how to make an Intellivision series that I started. And so in the first video I did, I showed you some of the materials and I talked about some of the stuff you can get and just to help yourself get prepared to start programming. And at the end of that video, I did show a two-line piece of code that did a very simple hello world across the screen. So in this video, I'm going to show you a little bit more code and how to actually compile that code, run it, and get it to work, essentially on an Intellivision. But in this case, we're going to be using the emulator, so we'll be running it on the computer. So for our first piece of code here, we got at the very, very top, we have print at 44, color 7. So essentially that's going to be 44, so you would count from 0 at the very, very top, go all the way to 19, and then the next line would be 20, and you would just keep counting down from there. Think of it like a grid. So 44 would be, a couple spaces down, and that's where you're going to start writing smiley face. And then the rest will be press any button. That's print at 202, so that's going to be at the very, very bottom of your screen. That's the last, last line, or well, the second last line, I would say, of your grid. And so that's just about that. What we're doing here is we're creating kind of like a home page. So you're going to have this little piece of code here, which is going to say do wait c equals cont1, which is a controller, your left controller. So this code's going to essentially wait until you hit any button on that controller, and then it's going to do it again. So this will give you that little bit of a slight pause when you want to show your screen. And then when you're done that, it comes down to the CLS, which is clear the screen. So it's going to wipe out everything that's on the screen. And then you got this define code. This is where you get to define your images, your bitmaps. And so for the smiley face, if you look down here, we have this smiley face. This is called a label. And then underneath it is your bitmap pieces. So a bitmap for the Intellivision is 8 squares across and then 8 squares down, grid. So you can see here there's 8, well, the dots represent nothing, so 0. And then the X's represent the 1s. So it's like you think you're building this little grid of 1s and 0s to make a little picture out of it. Now, you don't need to use X's. You could use hashtags and stuff like that. Really anything other than the period. So you can use that to make your image. And you can kind of see, it does kind of look like, you see the circle shape there, you can see the 2 eyes, and there's a little smiley face. So this would be graphic number 0, and then if I made another one underneath it, say I did another one, and I wanted to, I don't know, maybe change the face, and slightly, and this would be graphic number 1, which is represented in our define statement. So we're defining 0 just to start your first set of bitmaps. So you can have 16 bitmaps, and then you have to start another line of bitmaps, another label of bitmaps. And so you essentially would have defined 0, and then the number of bitmaps. So right now there's 2, so I'd have to change that to a 2 if I wanted to use that second bitmap. But for this case, we're not using 2, so I'm going to delete that. And then we have smiling face, which is the label here. It's going to this label to read this bitmap. It's a little confusing at first. This was, to be honest, for me, when I was reading the programming games for Intellivision book, and I was really trying to figure out how this define thing worked. And essentially, it's just think of it as 0 to 16, and then if you used up all your 16 bitmaps and you need to start another one, then it would be define 16 and then carried on from there. So then going down for the rest of the code, we got some variables here. Again, this is all based on if you know basic programming, but essentially what a variable is it's something that can contain information. So the x is going to contain the value of 84, and y is going to contain the value of 52. And then we got c for 0. And then we go to our main loop. So this is another label here, our loop. And so this is where the game is going to actually happen. Everything's going to loop through frames. I think I might have mentioned it. I don't know if I mentioned it in the first video, but the Intellivision goes by frames. So imagine just like a television, everything you watch is another frame coming on. Or if you look at old camera, like a camera, not a camera, but film strip, and you could see each individual frame. So that's the way the Intellivision is going to work. It's going to loop one frame every time, and so every time this frame happens, everything inside here in this main loop is going to execute. So we're going to have this sprite here, which is our smiley face. So it's sprite 0. The Intellivision has up to 8 sprites, so you would have sprite 0 all the way up to sprite 7, and that's it. To get around that, you have to do some tricks and animations and stuff like that, but generally you're going to have to think of your sprites wisely, so you can't use up too many sprites. It's one of the more difficult parts that I ran into, especially when I was making my Keystone Capers game, because I wanted to have more sprites. I used 3 sprites for the police officer. I had 3 sprites for the escalator, and I had 1 sprite for the obstacles. And so, it just got to a point where I could only have 2 more sprites for the robber, and it made that I can only make the robber 2 colors. So, yeah, you really have to think about your sprites. But what's happening here is sprite 0. This is the location on where it is. This is a little bit technical. This is something that's best to look into a little bit further. And there is ways to make this more readable. But for now, we'll just know that that's the location. Or not the location, but this is basically saying that the sprite is visible and it's detectable. And then this is our location, the X, so it's going to show up 84. And over here, we got the Y position. So I'm struggling to remember what the 100 was again. I'm sure if there's anybody that knows this stuff, will probably make a comment in the below, but I've totally forgotten what that means again. So we got the Y, and then that's our Y position. So X going sideways, Y going up and down. And then we have, this is where it's going to be in memory, and then it's 7, the last digit there, is our color scheme going from 0 to 7. So 0 being black, 7 being white. And then you have 0 here, which is this bitmap. This 0 being the first bitmap in the line, or in the list of bitmaps. So this is basically, I know this is a little bit complex, and I'm still learning this stuff myself, so don't feel too intimidated. I mean, once you learn just what needs to be there, your main focus is going to be which sprite number you want, what color you want, and which bitmap you want. And then the rest will be the location, X and Y. These variables could be anything. In fact, if you wanted it to be a fixed location, always in the same spot, you would just put the number there. I want it to be 34 over. But here, in this case, we're able to use these variables. And the main reason is because we're going to want to move this smiley face around. So then we have the wait function, or wait command. This is important because you need to wait till the next frame before things can execute. So your sprite is going to draw on the screen, and you're going to want to wait for the next frame before you start to do anything, or else your sprite's going to go crazy. So you have to do that wait command. Now for this line here, this group of code here, this is where your controller is working. So if, we'll do each one in, well, I'll start with this one anyways. If cont1.up, so this is your controller, which I talked about over here, cont1. So if you tap up on the controller, then you're going to execute this line. So this is going on the Y, which is your Y location up and down. So as long as it's greater than 8, we don't want it to go less than 8 because it'll go off the screen, then Y equals Y minus 1. So we're going to make X go down by 1 every time we push up on the controller. Because as you go up to the top, you're going to get to 0 eventually. So we're going to stop it when it hits about 8. That way you don't go way, way up and then you're gone off the screen. So what it's doing is every time this main loop goes by, it's going to check if the controller pressed up, and if it did, it's going to move our smiley face up one pixel. And then the same thing down here. If you push down, then as long as you're not less than 96, because you don't want it to go off the screen again, then you're going to add a 1. And then you do the same with the X locations. So we got if you tap left on the controller, and as long as you're not greater than 8, then it's going to add another 1 to the X position. And like this is always updating X, so X will always be changing. So in this case, 84 would become 85. And then when you come back to, when you get to the bottom of the loop here, you just simply go to main loop, which is the loop here. So this is where it's going to be constantly cycling. It's going to go start here, and it's going to go to main loop, so it's going to go back, and it will just continuously do this until you pretty much turn the game off. It's going to be continuously looping. And so it'll be constantly checking if you're hitting the button, and then it'll be updating the sprite to go on this X and Y position that you're updating here. So then X will change and Y will change every single time. And that's it. I mean, it's a very simplified program, and there is multiple ways of doing this. This is just one way of doing it. There's different ways you can use, control the controller settings. You can actually get very specific on the buttons. This is just a very basic, easy way of doing it. And when you're done, you would save your file, which would be it's in Notepad right now, but you have to change it to its .bas, B-A-S, not TXT, because the software doesn't understand the TXT. So I named this smile.bas. I recommend keeping your name small when you're programming in the beginning, because you got to type all this out, and if you have a really, really long name, you're going to be typing and typing and typing when you go to compile it. So once that's saved, and I have my folder, you save it in your SDK folder, then we have to move on to compiling the code. Alright, so when you launch the command console, you'll see a box pop up, and you're going to see this information here. It's going to tell you that which version it is and your path. I believe when you create your path, or when you put the software in a specific folder, when you unpack it or unzip it, it should keep the path, but if not, you might have to do a little bit of work. Again, I would go on the Intellivision programming forums on the Atari Age, and you can always check there, or you could just leave some comments in the video, and I can probably help you out. But I believe it should know the path that you're on. So I have it under Brian's stuff here, Intellivision Inti-Basic SDK. So now the first command we're going to want to do is we want to run it through Inti-Basic. So we're going to say Inti-Basic, one word, and then space. Here's where we put in our file name, and this is why I said we got to keep the file name small. So smile.bas. So that's our program right there, smile.bas. And then it has to run through the assembler. So smile.asm. Now this is the part that's also in the book that I was talking about, the programming for Intellivision games. Programming Intellivision games. It's actually in there. It's one of the first few sections of the book. And so I always had this open that section open when I first started because I didn't memorize all this until after doing it several times. And you will be typing these things in quite a bit when you're testing your program because you're going to have to run the program, see if it works, see if there's anything you want to change or update, and then you'll have to go and type it all in again. Unfortunately, it has to be done this way. I'm not sure if there's plans to have any kind of like, software where you can just, view the program. But this is kind of like the way it is, and until something changes. So once you hit that, you're going to see all this stuff pop up. So it's going to tell you 3 used 8-bit variables of 228 variables available. So that was my X, Y, and Z variables. 0 16-bit variables. I'm not using any 16-bit variables because I don't need to. That gets a little bit more complicated. And then it says it's finished. If there was a problem with the logic, there would be errors there. So everything seems to be good. So now you need to do this piece of code, which is AS1600. And then you do the -0, small 0. And then we're going to put in our name again, smile. And then we're going to do a space, and then smile again. Now you see if these were long names, I'd have to type it all out. So keeping it small is good. .asm. So we have AS1600 space -0 space smile space smile.asm. And then we're going to run that. So it's going to give me an error summary, no warnings. Again, if there's a problem with your logic or your code, something will probably pop up there and tell you you're going to have to go back and do it again. You'll have to go into your code and look for the problems. So at this point, we're going to have to now grab the ROM that got generated and put it in the proper folder. So once you finish that step, you're going to have to go back into your folder and you're going to have to find the ROM now. So we have the smile.bas, BAS, and you'll see all these other little files underneath it as well, or with it. So you have a bin, a config, and a ROM. So the ROM is the game itself. So this is what we're going to grab. We're going to grab that ROM, I'm going to copy it, and then we have to go into our bin folder, which is up here for me, wherever it is in your window. So you have to find the bin folder. Usually what I do is I open up a new window, but for this sake we'll just go in here. So in the bin folder we have all this stuff in here. That's our emulator, but we want to look for the ROMs folder because this is where the emulator looks for the game. And then we'll go into the ROMs folder, and these are all my ROMs from games and programs I've been working on. You can see here, like I got, there's Helly, that's not mine obviously, that's another programmer's game, but there's, my Keystone game is here, and my Space Taxi game that I'm working on. But anyways, you're going to drop it in here, so I'm just going to copy and replace. Obviously that's where it's sitting, and now you got your ROM ready to go. So now that we have the ROM in the proper folder, we're going to run the game. So first thing we need to do is call the emulator, JZINTV, and then -Z3. I believe that has to do with the size of the screen. And then your program name, Smile. And then it's gonna run. Okay, so we got it up now, smiling face. Press any button. So I can do this with my joystick if I want to, or I can do it with the keyboard. Either way, so I'm gonna hit a button, and there's our smiley man. So now if I push up, he goes up. If I push down, and goes that way and that way. So, I mean, not very exciting, but it's working, and it's a program. And this is just the basics of what you can do. And obviously there's a lot more. You would want to add colors, you'd want to have your backgrounds, you need to add collisions. The list goes on and on. But that was your basic program, and that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to creating games for the Intellivision. Anyways, let me know if you have any comments. I know this was kind of like, depending on your skill level, of course, in basic programming, and if you've done any of this stuff before, it's, you know, it could be challenging at first, but reading through the programs and reading what each piece of code does and then understanding it, you know, it does take a little bit of time. I myself am still learning. This is not, you know, I'm far from, you know, being good at what I'm doing here, but, you know, it's a learning process. So just know that there's a lot of resources out there. And like I said in my first video, go to the Atari Age forums under the Intellivision section, and there's a lot there. And if you don't find what you're looking for, you can actually ask questions. So I'll probably do another video again to talk about some of the tools that you could use to start making actual graphics and making things look pretty. And, you know, just stuff that's really helpful that have been created to be used alongside of programming. Anyways, hope you liked the video. Let me know what you think. Throw some comments down below. Hope you subscribe. Talk to you later.